the money was wasted because of neoliberal policy, where you subcontract things out and pay for the shareholder demands before you pay for the actual utility of the product that you're trying to create. We're overpaying for agency workers because we can't retain nurses staff in the public sector, so we contract them out to the private sector, paying more money because we're trying to shift people from public into the private sector deliberately to try and undermine the NHS, specifically to force through privatisation as a necessary evil. Speaking of lack of investment in our public services, junior doctors are on strike, everybody. If you haven't already heard from the millions of segments from all the left-wing channels and all the news channels talk about this stuff, I'm going to have to throw my hat in the ring and have this discussion because it's necessary, because we stand the junior doctors. And to put it into context, they're asking for a 35% increase on their pay, which is not a pay rise. This is pay restoration. Their pay has lagged behind the increasing cost of living due to inflation over the past 15 years since 2008 by up 26% if you go by retail price index. And if you add on the last year's worth of inflationary figures, the 35% is just pay restoration back to a real terms pay that what it was in 2008, right? This is not a ridiculous demand, right? It looks ridiculous because it's 35%. Who can afford a 35% pay rise, for example? But it's only ridiculous. The reason why they're in this position is because of continually hampered and constrained pay from the public sector over the last 15 years of New Labour and austerity. So the reason why we're in this position is because of catastrophically poorly mismanaged economic policy by 13 years of Conservative government. Predominantly was why we're in this position. And the reason why it needs to be, the pay restoration is so important is because we have a recruitment and retention problem. 4 in 10 junior doctors are looking at other jobs. 1 in 3 are looking at moving to different countries, right? If we do not fix this recruitment and retention problem now, the NHS will die. This is the fight for the future of our NHS, both this and the nurses' strikes, right? This is why the nurses should reject the paltry pay deal from the government. This needs to fix the retention problem. I talked about it at length. The reason why they wanted to... why Steve Barclay is refusing to come into talks, why after months and months and months of the junior doctors saying, we want to have talks about this, we don't want to go on strike, please come and negotiate, and the government refusing to negotiate. This is where we end up with, and they have been forced into this position by a government that refuses to pay them properly and refuses to have discussions around pay as well. So this is why we're in this position in the first place, due to historic failures and also current failures of this administration. And this will have a negative impact on patients. It will have a negative impact on patients. Patients are going to have appointments cancelled. It's going to be devastating. There'll be additional amounts of excess death in this country because of what's going to happen with the lack of with all the appointments being cancelled. But it is unfortunately the position that the junior doctors have been forced into because the government have not come to the table and haven't bothered actually listening to this, right? Now, you fundamentally have to believe that things have reactions and equal and opposite actions and equal and opposite reactions, and the continual austerity-led squeeze of our health service and the people who work there has reached a breaking point, and the NHS cannot survive unless these people have pay restoration, because the conditions that they work in that are impossible to work in are obviously, first of all, a symptom of austerity in investment into the actual structure of the health service, but it's also a symptom of the lack of the problem they have with retention. There's now not enough staff, so the existing staff are now overworked, makes them even more likely to quit in this vicious cycle, right? So they have to get their pay restored to fix these inherent problems. And people want to try and say, well, the doctors are needlessly causing excess death. I don't give a shit. I actually just don't care anymore, right? Because if we lose our health service, that'll be even worse, right? And even before they were striking, there were still people were still dying, loads of excess deaths before they were striking. The austerity is the real thing to blame here, as it always is. Fucking neoliberalism. We've done the meme. But let's watch this little clip here. There's this clip here from a junior doctor on Good Morning Britain, I believe it is. Yes, it's Good Morning Britain, with, of course, fucking Richard Madeley, that twat. And she absolutely eviscerates him, and it's a really, really good clip, so let's watch it. We're talking about the issues that have led to the situation in the first place and the bullshit media narrative surrounding it.
We have far more people who are off sick if you compare them to the numbers in 2019. We don't have any admin staff. There are no nurses. We've got 45,000 vacancies at the moment when we talk about nurses. Junior doctors did this as a last resort. Do you think they're happy doing this? Certainly not. Over 900 doctors have already left the UK for Australia between 2021 and 2022. While you and I are sad.
Is GMB where Piers got eviscerated by the communist girl? It's literally where my follow notification comes from. Her saying, I'm literally a communist. Yeah, same place.
Here, debating whether junior doctors should stay, get paid or not paid. They're leaving us.
And the industrial action is actually, in the end, the same as refusing to help a patient face-to-face. And I'm not saying that I think that.
No.
But
I beg to disagree. I beg to disagree. 500 extra people are dying every single week just because they can't access care. Where is the government when this happens? Junior doctors are striking because people are dying every single week and nobody's doing anything. It's not just about pay. It's about bad working conditions. It's about not being able to focus on their work.
Her name is Anita Raja. She is on Twitter at Dr. Anita Raja if you want to follow. Her at is there.
Cannot compare a junior doctor's 12-hour shift to somebody who's packaging boxes. They are dealing with human lives. They need to be there. They need to be present there. They need to focus. There's a lot of effort put behind it. And, I certainly think, Richard, that they are doing this for the public, for the safety of the public.
No, do you think they're breaking their oath?
No, they're not. They're trying to bring attention to the fact that the working conditions within hospitals are dire. People are dying. Nobody has been paying attention. Now everybody is in front of the screen.
Yeah. So yeah, 100% correct. She's absolutely 100% correct. And again, it is the future of the NHS that is at stake. And unless these people take action now, there will be no future. Because the reason why I've said this again and again and again, but it's worth me repeating it for new viewers or returning viewers who've forgotten, the reason why they are refusing to properly actually have talks and negotiation on this is twofold. First of all, they want to be able to kick the cart down the road so the headline figure of inflation goes down as it drops over time so that the demands look more ridiculous in the face of lower headline figures of inflation when prices haven't actually dropped. Inflation is the rate at which prices increase, not where prices are, right? So they were trying to exploit people's lack of knowledge of how inflation works to manufacture consent against the doctors. The second thing is that they want to keep doctors' pay low to force them into the private sector, right? They want to force them into agency work. They want to force them into the private sector because they don't want to undercut they don't want to have to compete with the private sector for jobs. They want the undercut the private sector wages so that they are forced to be able to have to work in the private sector to get proper remuneration to be able to survive. We have doctors taking on second jobs driving for Uber. It's not sustainable on £14 a fucking hour, earning less than they would at Pret in London at this point. And this is the issue. This is the main real issue here about why the Conservatives are doing what they're doing. And it's so monumentally, it's sickening because they're deliberately trying to do it to privatise the NHS. It's the only obvious reason they would be doing it, why they would be sacrificing so many lives and so much political capital in the wake of an NHS crisis without some grand motive to want to do this, because it's losing them next election. And these people are an election-winning juggernaut. They've won more elections than any other party on the planet. They can only be doing it if they specifically have some kind of deliberate, overarching, secret plan, right? And the obvious one is they want to privatise the health service. Doctors earn £14 an hour in England. Junior doctors do, yes. The people going on strike here earn £14 a fucking hour. That's less than someone who works at a coffee chain in London would earn. It's pathetic. And it's deliberate. It's explicitly deliberate to try and force them into the private sector and to force the privatisation of the health service as well. It's sickening. It's really sickening. One junior doctor published his payslip. His earning was 19k. It was literally less than I earn in a fucking call centre. And of course, it's not just about the Conservatives. We want to, on this channel, one of people I love to critique is Sir Keith of Starmershire, and he has come out with the take that he usually has around things like union disputes as a party of the working people, as the union's representative, the leader of the party that represents the unions in Westminster. Let's what he has to say about the junior doctor strikes and the pay restoration. I wonder what he has to say about this. Let's have a look. No prizes for guessing what his particular line on this is.
Affordable, but I do think that the role of government is... I don't think 35% is affordable, but I do think that the role of government is to get in the room, around the table, and to negotiate a settlement. And for very many people whose operations are going to be cancelled, that's exactly what they want the government to do. So yes, I think 35% is unaffordable, but that's not an excuse to sit on your hands and do nothing. That's a reason to get in the room and negotiate, and that's what the government should be doing.
Yeah, he's literally saying doctors should be paid less than the last Labour government paid them. It's the most mealy-mouthed, pathetic response from Keir Starmer. It really, really is. Just saying, oh, well, actually, there needs to be some kind of negotiation. I think that's unaffordable, blah, 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 blah. What's really important is the public finances rather than junior doctors. And what the worst part is that this isn't good electoralism. This is not good electioneering. This is not good optics, right? The public overwhelmingly back the nurses and doctors in their strike action. And they overwhelmingly back the public nature of the NHS, right? All you have to do to win over the public, which apparently seems to be Keir Starmer's only metric for success, right? Keir Starmer has shown time and time again that the only two things he cares about are destroying the left and looking electable, for example, and trying to win over the public to win the next general election. When the public backs the NHS and the striking nurses and doctors so much, you just come out and say, look, we created the NHS, Anya and Bevan created the NHS, Labour are the party of the NHS, right? We back NHS workers to the fucking hilt, right? And the government should give in to their pay demands because of what happened during the pandemic and because of how completely invaluable these people are to our society and the functioning of our society, right? You should just come down and say, I back these people 100%. The government has failed them. It is an absolute outrage what they're doing, and we should absolutely be paying them exactly what they're worth, which is what they were worth when last time the Labour Party were in government. But he won't do that because he's pathetic and he's a little lick-spittle piece of shit who doesn't even want to upset the apple cart at all as far as the right-wing media's tiny little Overton window is concerned. And it's not even good. It's not even good electoralism. It's not even good electoralism, right? Just tell the public, we are the party of the NHS, and they'll flock to you, right? It's been Labour's singular political point of calling for decades and decades. Just be the party of the NHS, and he can't even do that. He can't even do that. And literally, this is the same guy who said, oh, we clapped for our key workers, blah, blah, blah. We need to show this proper remuneration. I guess that's another U-turn from flip-flopping Keir Starmer. I'm just lost my patience with this stuff now. Because, it doesn't even... If it was supposed to be good electoral politics, I would at least understand. But it's not even that. He's just obviously a neoliberal and obviously a right-wing and obviously a conservative who's only tied himself to the Labour Party for the sake of wanting to be able to get a career in politics, so he has to join in with one of the big two parties and dragging it further towards the centre to maintain their position as the party for career politicians to be able to make their bag and to be successful, for example. So much so that he doesn't even believe in the founding principles of the Labour Party anymore. Not just around supporting the union's demands, but also supporting the fucking NHS, which is like a national religion at this point. Anyway, there was another discussion that was had. Yes, the parties are consolidating into two parties like in America, and things in the UK, it's on economic and social issues, right? They're both transphobic, right? They're both anti-migrant, both anti-refugee. At least in the US, the Democrats pretend to care about trans people. Anyway, more discussions were had about this on Cross Question on LBC. There was a discussion where man of the moment, Ollie Dugmore from Politics Joe, was on LBC's Cross Question along with Natty Bennett from the Green Party, someone else from Res Publica think tank, a former advisor David Cameron, and Kate Andrews, economics editor of The Spectator, friend of the show, and columnist of the Daily Telegraph, and a former fellow for the Institute of Economic Affairs. Yet another person whose literal only job is to specifically want to agitate for the needs of the super rich and manufacture consent for the worst possible policies of social murder in this country. So I'm a big fan of Kate Andrews. We are here on the show So there's a discussion they have around what to do about doctors' pay, and I think there is more to be had about this conversation that's being said on social media and that's been talked about in what Politics Joe had to describe about it and what they post on Twitter as well. So I think I can add to this conversation a little bit on an economic kind of discussion. So let's listen. Right, I've done waffling. Let's actually listen to the fucking clip, and I watch the clip in its totality, the whole discussion in its totality, rather than just the clip that's going viral.
Let's go to our next question. It's a text question from Cara in Lowestoft. Are junior doctors' pay demands fair? Well, they're asking for 35%, which sounds an awful lot, but their justification is that just makes up for what they've lost since 2010. So it's sort of pay restoration, I think, is the phrase.
And the thing is, again, sounds like a lot. It's actually for a Tory, it's a very kind of fair way of Iain Dale putting it. And that it sounds like a lot, but when you put it into context, it's not a lot. It is a lot. It is a lot, but it's not a lot that it should tell you that the junior doctors are being greedy. It's a lot which should tell you that the Tories are pieces of shit who keep making people poorer, right? The reason why this number is big shouldn't make you angry with doctors, it should make you angry with the Tories. It should make you angry with neoliberals. It should make you angry with the people who want to try and get the NHS privatised, for example. This is why this big number should surprise you, not because the junior doctors are being greedy or anything like that. So, I mean, yeah, it's in the same way that when people say, oh, well, actually, the rich of our country pay the vast majority of our taxation, right? Yes, they do pay the majority of our taxation. That's a bad thing. It's not bad because our tax system isn't progressive enough. It's because there are too many rich people and not enough middle class people, not enough working class people who have comfortable living. Like, working class people earn so little money they don't even pay any tax. Whereas the reason why so much of our economy, the taxation is paid for by rich people, is because there's too many of them. The economy is too skewed at either end of the distribution. If we had a more even income distribution, right, the middle classes would pay more of a bigger share of our taxation.
Philip Blonde.
I think, look, the problems in the health service are so widespread, so systemic, that what causes me the great...
This guy was literally an advisor to David Cameron. Well, I'm sorry to say, mate, but I'm going to tap the sign again. You got what you wanted.
Greatest pain is we don't have a Conservative Party that has any agenda for public sector reform, that has no plan for how to remodel the state. And in the absence of that...
Yes, they did have a plan for remodelling the state. Your plan of getting rid of the fucking state. Literally. Like David Cameron said, there is such a thing as society, but it's not the same as the state. That was their plan, was to get rid of the state, to sell off the state, to contract out the state to their friends. To privatise, like, you literally were advisor to this fucking man. This is your economic policy writ large.
Reform. One can understand why employees of the NHS who are subject to...
There are two think tankers on this imagination scene. This guy's the founder of the Res Publica think tank, which is, I guess, like a market liberal type of think tank. And there's Kate Andrews, who's from the IEA.
The consequences of this massive dysfunction are protesting. I'm sure that it's very extreme for them. I mean, I know some of them, and their lives are incredibly extreme. And at a certain point in their career, they are living, in terms of income and standard of living, several orders of magnitude out of kilter with their peer group. And so I do understand it. But I think that what worries me about the government is they have no agenda other than saying no. They have no plan to reform health in this country when we've got life expectancy declining, when we've got health...
Thing is, and again, there's the word. This is the manufacturing consent, right? This is where people say the NHS is broken, it has to be reformed, right? Where there's trying to smuggle in this assumption that the problem with the NHS is structural, rather than poor fiscal policy from a government that continually wants to undermine it, and actually have undermined it through bad reforms. The Lansley reforms, the internal market reforms, for example, the restructuring, the continual contracting out to profit-seeking enterprises, to selling out huge trusts to Centene and Virgin Care, for example. They did reform it, and they made it worse, right? They should get it back to how it was and properly fund it. The problems will fucking go away, I promise you. But the reason why is that they want to try and manufacture the consent for privatisation by sneaking in these implicit assumptions, right? It's really sneaky the way that, and clever the way that they do it, where they say, well, then we should look at these possible reforms. No. Go back to how it was when it was when it was a proper public service, where they didn't have the stupid internal market reforms, and there wasn't consistently contracted out to the private sector at additional cost to the public sector, to the public purse, right? The more public money is spent on a contracted out service because you have to pay for the shareholders' profits as well. It's very easy maths to do.
Qualities that are rampant and pernicious, and this is one of the failings of Conservative government, is a complete lack of imagination about how to reform the state and how to treat staff within the state.
But answer the question: are there pay demands?
I don't want a fucking reformed state. I want a state back. I want the state back. I want the post-war consensus back. It worked. It was better than what we have now. Again, like, I got these think tank people are fucking vermin. They're genuine like fucking subhumans. I cannot overstate the amount to which these people are a poison, like poisonous people for the public discourse, incredibly poisonous.
Fair.
For the sake of the rich people who pay their bills as well.
No, I think, but I think there needs to be a
Theoretically, in the video game Minecraft,
much more extensive response, just as there was with the nurses across the whole public sector. There's a medium there which the government isn't reaching.
Natalie.
Well, first of all, I very much agree with Philip that the government just doesn't get it on health and has no plan to tackle what we have is a terrible quality of public health in the UK, and particularly with life expectancy and healthy life expectancy.
Yeah, fuck it. No, all of them, right? Emily Carver, Kate Andrews, Christian Niemetz, Mark Littlewood, all of these fuckers, right? From all of these think tanks, Robert Colville, Reem Ibrahim, whatever. As soon as I am the General Secretary of the Communist Republic of England and Wales, they're going straight to a fucking Labour camp in Minecraft. Straight away. No fucking question about it, right? These people who have deliberately spent their entire careers and lives to try and undermine the existence of a public NHS, no, you're scum, right? You're literal fucking scum. I have stepped in dirt that is worth more to humanity than you are.
Going down in many parts of the country and falling. To directly answer the question from Cara, yes, Carla Denyer, the Green Party co-leader, and Caroline Lucas were both on the picket lines today supporting them. They've already said that, they're prepared to sit down to the government to talk and say that they will accept less than 35%. So that was a starting point based on the fact that their pay in real terms is down 26% over the past decade or so. So, £14 an hour for a starting junior doctor. That's someone who's studied, who's taken on a massive amount of student debt.
Yes, I believe so, Tartines.
The other backgrounds to this story is student debt that's put people, doctors, nurses and other health professionals in a total mess. But I think, listening to people on the picket line, it's the state of the NHS that they're as much concerned about. And what Philip was saying about the government not getting this, public health, we have a broken food system. The government will not even acknowledge there's such a thing, a category as ultra-processed foods that it needs to tackle when we get more than 50% of our calories from ultra-processed foods. If we're going to ultimately protect our NHS...
Again, another problem of neoliberalism where the ways in which food has been over-marketized means that things that are healthy and easy to cook and people's time where they have no time to cook because they have to work 2 jobs to make ends meet because wages have been depressed means that they have to rely more on ultra-processed foods rather than freshly cooked food because they've run out of time or the ability to be able to pay for the cooking, to pay for the energy that they need to actually cook the food to create proper meals, right? All of this is a result of neoliberalism. It's fucking neoliberalism. Every single time, it's fucking neoliberalism. Obviously, I think that the structural things at play here that's more important than the ultra-processed foods, right? But even so, like, it doesn't matter. She's still correct in what she's saying here. And what I will say, I think she's wrong about one thing here. She is wrong by saying that, the junior doctors should accept that they have to be bargained down from 35%. No, they shouldn't, right? The actual position that I said this during the nurses' strikes too, and I'll say it again now, because the issue here is not just one of pay restoration; it's one of retention. Because of the cyclical and the kind of feedback loop that you get from poor pay leading to bad retention, leading to fewer staff, leading to overworked staff, which means more of them leave, which means the rest of them are more overworked, so more of them do leave. This vicious cycle has to be broken, and it has to be broken by a gigantic increase in pay for these people now, immediately, right? There can be conditions about, even if it's a 5-year pay freeze, something like that, right? Which puts them like 10% behind if the Bank of England hits its inflation target. So they'll have pay restoration now, and then a 10% fall in real terms pay over the next 5 years, for example, right? You fix the retention crisis now by making it so that the wages are enough to keep people in the service and to attract new people into the service as well. Even if it means a long pay freeze for the next however many years, you fundamentally fix the key issue here, which is retention and recruitment, which has to come at the expense of paying these people now.
And get a healthy society and give people a decent quality of life. We've got to tackle things like the domination of multinational food companies in our food system.
I mean, in the last question, you managed to get bus fares in, and now you've managed to get processed foods and a question about doctors' pay. Respect, Natalie. Utter respect. See if anyone can beat that, Kate.
Do you see why I get frustrated with the Green Party? Because they have these bugbears, right? And they can't talk about the elephant in the room, which is fucking neoliberalism.
These are not serious pay demands, and
Your face isn't a serious pay demand. Ayo!
really struggle at this point with the argument that they're out there picketing for better services for their patients in the NHS. Patients' lives are being put at risk by the strike. We know that there's going to be horrible repercussions for those patients. It's an estimated.
Is that all Keith has said about it? Yes, that is all Keith has said about it. Because, like every single position, he has workshopped it through focus groups and through like little surveys that they've done and walking around constituencies and with their little spin doctors. And so he's got his little rehearsed line and he'll repeat it over and over and over again because it's an automaton, a simulacrum pretending to be a politician.
350,000 appointments and procedures will be cancelled over the next 4 days. Women's planned cesareans are being cancelled. People aren't getting their cancer diagnosis. Let's not pretend that this is for patients. And if you want to talk about pay...
I mean, I'm sorry. What about the patients that will fail if we have no NHS? Well, of course, you want that, though, Kate, don't you? Because you're a free marketeer shill. So, whatever.
Look, your average junior doctor is earning, it's quite a wide range, between £25,000 baseline minimum up to almost £70,000 baseline minimum. And that is not before you calculate what they're earning extra for weekend work, night shifts, unsociable hours.
But on Twitter this afternoon, a second-year junior doctor put his payslip on. It's £1,823 here last month. Now, there'll be many people listening to this programme who don't get paid as much as that. But if you, as Natalie said, if you've gone through however many years it is of training, the student debt that you... No,
she's from the Institute of Economic Affairs. What if they don't want to do weekend work? Well, yeah, exactly. Plus, they're doctors. They should get paid more than us, right? I'm happy for doctors to get paid more. Feel free. It's like, I'm not jealous of doctors for getting paid more. They do far more valuable work than selling phones to bellends, right? I'm sorry, but I'm happy for them to get paid more than I do.
You've built up over those years, you might expect to earn a little bit more than that.
Hold on, we can say that about so many professions, and there's so few professions where your lifetime earning is going to come anywhere close to what a doctor can earn. So, and we also need to...
I don't fucking care. I want the NHS to not die. Is that too much to ask, Kate? Well, yeah, apparently so.
Factor in pensions here too, right? Taxpayers are on the line for paying 20% into doctors and nurses' pensions. So maybe we need to have a conversation and rejig how much money they get up front. Let me finish. Maybe we need to have a conversation to rejig what money they get up front compared to what we're paying into their pensions. But there's a reason that the lifetime allowance was lifted in the last budget to get more doctors back into work. Over the course of your lifetime, this is an extremely well-paid profession. Many people will empathize with not getting inflation-based pay raises because the average pay raise in this country is below the rate of inflation. Doctors are not unique in this.
But that doesn't actually matter, right? I would wish I had a real terms pay increase. I wish my workplace was unionised. Like, whatever. I will deal with it. I have a secondary source of income, whatever it may be, for example. But as we've said before, this is not just an issue with regards to doctors' standard of living and their ability to deal with the cost of living crisis through their own pay packet. It's an issue of recruitment and retention, the future of the NHS. And she refuses to answer the fucking question. She refuses to properly address the real issue, which Natalie Bennett already raised about the reason why they're engaging in their strike action at the moment. Why doesn't she go after football players who earn many people's annual salary each week? Well, yeah, exactly. It's ridiculous, isn't it? I hate to do the. I do hate to do the. We should pay doctors what footballers get paid. But you're right. Like as someone who believes in the free market, for example, as Kate does, she's a explicitly like free market think tank person, right? If doctors are leaving your service, you are not paying them enough. The market has shown you that their market value is higher than what they're being paid. Otherwise, they would be continuing. Otherwise, you'd be recruiting more and retaining more, right? This is simple market economics, and she's failing the basic principle of it.
I think their working conditions must be addressed in the same way patient conditions must be addressed. But the idea that these are, in any real way, low-paid jobs, especially over the course of one's lifetime, it's ridiculous.
Compared to other countries, they are. And that's part of the problem, isn't it? Staff retention.
Yes, compared to other countries, and I would love to adopt some of those countries' healthcare systems, right? You want to start talking to me about the German system, the Australian system, the Netherlands, you want to even...
Well, that German system where they pay more per capita for healthcare than we do? Is that really worth emulating, right?
Talk about France, we can talk about why in those systems doctors get paid more money, but you cannot on one hand refuse to talk about reform, as Philip has mentioned, always say that that's a backdoor to privatization, which it is not. You cannot...
Yes, it is. Shut the fuck up. Of course you would say that it is when it isn't. But even so, we've had reforms and they were bad reforms. They were privatization reforms and they were internal market reforms, right? The reforms that have been done and have been implemented by a Conservative government that wanted to do them specifically for ideological reasons rather than utilitarian ones have got us into the position that we are in now.
Call yourself a public servant and say, I'm working for the state in this monopoly on healthcare that we think is a public good. And then on the other hand, demand the kinds of salaries that you get from more free market healthcare. You can't have both.
Ollie Dugmore,
clearly you can, because they did in 2008. Maybe it was all PFI debt. Maybe I'm completely ignorant on this issue. But it seems to me, right, the Occam's razor solution to this is that why don't we do what we did in 2008? If they were able to earn that much money, so they want to get restored pay to not to the massive amounts doctors make in the United States, for example, right? They're not asking for that. They're asking for what they earned in this country under this healthcare system before the Lansdowne reforms in 2008. So her point doesn't even make sense from, the Occam's razor perspective. Why do you think people don't mention the things like you have about Germany? Do the commentator or Dale not know or something else? They probably don't know because these people, the journalists in our country, they don't know what the fuck they're talking about.
Are junior doctors' pay demands fair? That's what Cara wants to know.
Yes.
So how would you pay for it?
Is that all you have to say?
Would you like, well, we can get into it. How would I pay for it?
Yeah, how would you pay for it? Where are you finding that money?
Taxes. Tax the rich, tax them until the pips squeak.
So genuinely, what taxes are you raising?
Hang on,
who am I arguing with?
Sorry, let Ollie set out his stall.
There is money in our political system. Where it gets spent is a political choice. Let's talk about the £4 billion in unusable PPE, a lot of which that money went to Conservative Party cronies, peers, donors. It is an ethical choice how we spend money in government. And I would challenge people in this country that if they want to go out and they want to clap for the NHS during a pandemic when we were literally sending them into hospitals to confront a disease that we didn't know anything about, sometimes wearing bin liners, those people deserve fair pay. They're not actually asking for an extraordinary pay rise. They're asking for the restoration of what they were paid in 2008. That's not an unreasonable demand.
So do you think part of the solution might be for the government to come forward and say, OK, we get that you've lost this money since 2010. We accept that. We accept
this guy, by the way, Scouser, this guy's the head of the content for Politics, Joe.
That part of your argument. We can't give you 35% now. You don't expect it. There's no way that we can do that. But over the next 3, 4, 5 years, we will do it. And here's the proposal.
Yeah.
Because again, the money was wasted because of neoliberal policy where you subcontract things out and pay for the shareholder demands before you pay for the actual utility of the product that you're trying to create. We're overpaying for agency workers because we can't retain nurses staff in the public sector, so we contract them out to the private sector, paying more money because we're trying to shift people from public into the private sector deliberately to try and undermine the NHS specifically to force through privatisation as a necessary evil and essentially put that onto a future right-wing Labour government to be the ones to enact that reform because they're the ones who will have the political capital to do so, right? And He mentions the PPE, for example, like the 37 billion on test and trace, which was just a fucking boondoggle for Dido Harding, right? It is a political choice, and it's being done deliberately to undermine the health service by a party that fundamentally disagrees with its existence as a public good.
That, to me, would be the logical way forward.
It's called negotiation.
No, but Iain, I'm sorry. Everybody has lost out. Everyone. It's not just doctors. It's not just nurses. Everybody has lost out. And you can't point to a one-off COVID spend, as irresponsible as some of that spending was. I agree with you. You can't point to a one-off spend and claim that that's how you would fund a perpetual commitment, which again isn't just salary, but is a massive pension on top of that as well, and say that's how I'd fund it. So seriously, you've both said you would 35% is reasonable. How would you fund it?
You'd fund it through.
So first of all, taxing the rich is a good thing to do, regardless of whether or not you've got fiscal expenditure that you want to engage in, right? You should tax the rich because they have too much wealth and we need to take it away from them, right? Simple as that, right? Tax them by wealth. Increase capital gains tax, equate it with income tax. Actually, probably bring income tax down as far as I'm concerned. Make capital gains higher so that you incentivize people to be productive. But also, you don't, we should wealth tax these people to force them to sell assets to bring the price down, like I talked about when I was reacting to and responding to Gary's economics. Why she's getting more time than fucking Ollie from Politics Joe, for example. It's ridiculous that she's continually controlling this conversation, despite the fact that she is ideologically compromised because of the people who pay her bills, for example. But the secret part of all of this, right? The secret part of all of this is you can deficit spend. You can deficit spend for doctors' wages. And you may say, no, Justice. Deficit spending on day-to-day spending, that's profligate, that's irresponsible. Unfortunately, though, I think you'll find that doctor salaries are an investment. They are an investment for the main. First of all, because you need to be able to get us into a position where the NHS doesn't just fucking collapse because there's no doctors, because they've all left because they can't get paid enough. But second of all, right, there's a question people talking about. So cast your minds back to when the budget was talked about, when we reacted to the budget live on stream. And Jeremy Hunt was talking about the fact that they need to get people into work. There's twofold reasons for doing this. One is a good reason, one's a bad reason. The bad reason is because they want to undercut the labour market. They want to cool down the labour market so people stop demanding higher wages by increasing the working age population and therefore increasing supply relative to demand to bring down the cost of labour. That's the bad reason. But the good reason why you'd want to get people back into work is because it increases overall productivity and labour force participation, which is not a bad thing. I like labour force participation. It creates a stronger economy. But, right, there's the big problem we have with labour force participation is not benefit scroungers. It's not like the people living off of benefits for their whole life. It's not people being boomers retiring early, for example. It's people who are incapacitated, people who are on disability. And the reason they're on disability is because the NHS has been defunded. It's been defunded and it's been undermined. People are off sick with mental health issues because there's no lot of mental health provision. They're problems that have been easy to solve through proper health policy have caused them to drop out of the labour market entirely or only work part-time and be less productive because of failures in the health service to deal with underlying conditions, chronic conditions, and things that could have been nipped in the bud if they'd been caught earlier by a properly invested in healthcare system. That's not happened. These people have all dropped out of the labour market, dropped out of the labour force. Our productivity has been hit. If we actually properly invested in the NHS and we had done over the last 13 years, our labour force participation would be higher. Our economic growth would be higher. What do you get when you get economic growth, children? Right? You get to increase your tax earnings. You get to increase your overall strength of your economy. And that means that deficits will pay for themselves. So it is an investment. It is an investment that you, even on a Keynesian level, you can justify deficit spending for. This isn't MMT I'm talking about here. This isn't just public debt is completely illusory, just give people the money, whatever, magic money tree, right? Even though I believe in that stuff, fundamentally, I do think that modern monetary theory is a good lens for viewing the way that we, in an economy with a sovereign central bank functions, even through a Keynesian lens. This is a future investment to be able to give us economic growth at the end of it, right? It may not intuitively be like that, but it's true. 100% true.
productivity gains. One of
no, I'm sorry, Liz. Liz Truss tried that. No, I want to know how you fund it.
One of the reasons we have low labour force participation in this country is the rise of endemic health and chronic conditions that remain unaddressed.
I fucking told you. Look, like, I see through the veil. I have not pre-watched this. I promise you I've not pre-watched this. This is a first-time reaction to everything other than what Ollie said that he posted on Twitter, for example. Right? I fucking knew. I see through the veil.
One of the tragedies of our current situation is our NHS performs very poorly against all sorts of international criteria in terms of health outcomes, from cancer to any number of chronic conditions. We have a very poor health system where nobody is in charge, where nobody wants to reform, and where there is no net gain. We also have an astonishingly...
I guess, to be fair, my point was different. My point was that because of these underlying health issues and because of the fact that we have a sick country, we have a very sick country, my point was that you can use that to justify deficit spending as infrastructure spending, as investment spending, right? Rather than day-to-day spending, which is what you're not supposed to use deficits to spend on, for example. And that's not the point he's going to make. He's saying that we need to reform, we need to privatize more shit. Well, that's not what he's saying, but that's what he means when he says reform, right? That's what they all mean, is reforming the NHS to make it more privatized or to not make it free at point of use, for example. That's what they don't say that's what they mean, but that's really what they mean. So I guess my point was slightly different to his point, in that my point was specifically around the idea that you can justify deficit spending for these junior doctors' salaries.
Cheap health system. If you look at GDP spend, the Americans spend twice our GDP on their healthcare.
Because it's very inefficient.
And it's the free market healthcare.
And it is not worse.
One in £6 spent by the government is spent on the NHS. How much more would you like it to spend?
The point I'm trying to
make... And
that's
true. We're also a sick country because of all the other things the austerity lost us, right? All of the other pieces of our culture and our society that got destroyed by the austerity paradigm, libraries, youth clubs, mental health centres, community centres, all these things that help keep people's mental health high, they all got fucking destroyed by austerity. And that's also led to the crisis that we have now, not just in mental health, but in physical health too.
Is that our health services actually, if you look in terms of GDP spend, is one of the most efficient in terms of spend.
It's not. Those figures are wildly out of date.
In terms of GDP spend.
It's not.
What we have is an unreformed, dysfunctional systemic system, and what the staff need to do is to...
If this guy says reform one more time, I'm going to lose my shit.
Is to accept the need for structural reform on a grand scale if we're going to improve health. And that's what absent from any union demand.
Good luck to any political party that goes into the next election saying we want to have structural reform of the NHS. Natalie.
I've just got to take on Philip's point about our health outcomes, which are absolutely dreadful. But
why do I think that Ollie didn't not interrupt more? Because he's not watched enough Vosh or Destiny. Right? When these people start gish galloping and they start telling lies and they start making points off of faulty assumptions that you don't challenge, you've lost already. You have to interrupt when they make the false assumption at the start that then that their point is predicated on. You immediately have to interrupt. He is too polite. We need more vociferous left-wing people to be on these panels, for example, because when you have people who are meek and who want to play the game, you lose this kind of stuff. And this is why people like Destiny and Vosh have the platforms that they do. It's because they are irreverent in a way that people on the left just fail to be, right? Obviously, Destiny isn't really on the left much anymore, but even so, as far as America is concerned, he is. And he uses his ability to be, rude, to be fair, and interrupt a lot in his debates, and he is successful in doing so. You've got to interrupt by saying whoa. Yeah, that's also true. It's a bit posh as well. That's what I think. You have to interrupt and not let them spout nonsense. If they're making one point in a vacuum, That's fine. That's absolutely fine. You're absolutely right, Mason. That's fine to let them finish their point. But when you have these continual faulty assumptions over and over and over again, that then other points are predicated on, there's a gish gallop. It's essentially just a gish gallop. So you have to interrupt and challenge the base assumption that they've made their point on. Because if you don't challenge that point, you fight on the ground you're always going to lose. Because they've manufactured the consent at that point. The manufactured consent is always about the underlying assumptions about what is true and what isn't. And then you have to then take that point of view at face value. Whereas if you challenge the underlying assumption, then you actually have the fight that you want to have, rather than continually rattling over the points where they've already won, because everyone always thinks by manufacturing consent of the assumption reform is inevitable, right? Which this panel is doing. Ollie is not pushing back. Natalie Bennett is not pushing back against these two other people, these think tank people, saying that reform is necessary and unavoidable, right? No one's pushed back against this implicit assumption. So we're now fighting over the scraps of the remainder of this discussion, but the right-wingers, they've already won. They've already won. They've literally already won. And everything else is just window dressing. Like, Ollie's going viral about this point, but like, if people watch the entire discussion, you come away from this thinking that reform is necessary when it really, really isn't.
But the question is whether you blame the NHS. We have some of the worst housing stock in Europe.
Well, it's multifactorial.
We have a terrible diet. We have terrible air pollution. All of those things have impacts on people's health outcomes.
And what's the problem? What's led to all of these bad housing stock and this poor food and all of these bad air pollution? Fucking neoliberalism. Every time. Literally every single time. Every single time. It's always neoliberalism. And it's the fault of all of our social ills, the death of the social contract, where people don't have any stake in society, and so much the corporations don't too. Obviously, they don't because it's capitalism, but at least proper social democratic regulation of these capitalist companies could lead to a healthier society. Mick Lynch, you're lying, you are a liar, like when we saw earlier with Chris Phillips. But yeah, exactly. Yeah, literally. Or wasn't it? It was Chris Phillips, wasn't it? Yeah, absolutely. The Mick Lynch, you tell them they're lying to their face. Tell them that they're bullshit. Tell them that properly take them to task for the absolute shit that they spout.
The 7.2 million waiting list on the NHS. I think the NHS probably has
7.5 by the end of this week.
I think we have some responsibility here to put on the NHS.
But we eat as a society twice as many ready meals as the rest of Europe on average. We also have the second longest.
Oh, she's so cringe. She's so cringe. Like, again, she's correct, but she's cringe. And again, she's lost the argument.
Working hours in Europe, and pre-COVID we had double the average commuting time.
Foods again, aren't you?
And
I'm on your side, but
and working hours and terrible housing, everything makes people unhealthy because our society is unhealthy. The NHS can't fix those, just as schools can't fix the impacts of poverty and inequality on health and education outcomes.
I'm going to be very unhealthy myself if I don't bring this to a close, because Corey, my producer, will probably.
So yeah, that was the discussion that we had. And again, the end of the right-wingers have won. They've won this discussion, right? Ollie made a good point that went viral. But if you've watched the whole discussion, the right-wingers said reform is necessary. They were not challenged on it at all. Natalie Bennett waffled on about food quality. And Ollie said we need a tax to pay for the junior doctor's salary, which is good. But the rest of them were making points about the NHS structurally that he was not pushing back on. He wasn't pushing back on it at all. I'll finish the segment here and just say, look, if you don't support the junior doctors and we do not get a proper pay settlement, the NHS is dead, right? This is the breaking point. This is the point at which you have to say, no, right? The class war is here. Whose side are you on, right? Either you're on the side of the doctors or you're on the side of the death of the NHS. That's your choice. So, yeah. I hate to end on that segment on another raw note, but it's tough. If you don't support the NHS, if you don't support the junior doctors, you support the end of the NHS as we know it. It's as simple as that.